I actually have not spent as much time on personally.
Oh
Yeah, it's
yeah.
like I know it's important, and this is one where I've just really kind of deferred to other people.
This is one I've kind of I kind of like took for granted that I had it figured out, and I haven't really thought about it for the last 6 years. So this will be an interesting parsing through my memories and brain.
Yeah, I'm in a similar position right now. I'm going to go on and do a podcast with Mike Dola from Stronger You. I'm excited for. We're going to talk about aging, health, longevity, and stuff like that, because that's what I studied in grad school at a very like in the weeds level. And I've just been kind of going on afternoon walks on the trails with Kels. I'm sitting there floating around. I'm like, okay, I'm like trying to like rekindle all of this stuff that I had so ingrained 5 years ago at this point. Like, okay, we got to really remember this really deep cell physiology, because those are some of the things we're probably going to like start to trickle into when we have these conversations. So I'm like, all right, brain, here we go. Get it going. We got to be able to talk about how a cell manages redox balance, the Nerf2 keep one pathway, electron flow, and how all these different things get turned on and off. But it's slowly coming back. It's like going out and dusting the shelves off.
Yeah.
But excellent. All right, listeners, thank you so much for being here. You're
funny.
a minute and 20 seconds in. I'm potentially wondering what in the world we're going to be doing today. Today will probably be on the shorter end, but I think it's still going to be really, really beneficial. And we're going to be talking about feet, and we're going to be talking about shoes, because this is still a topic that we get questions on, and it's still a topic that I think it's still like really pretty polarized on the internet. So we're going to do our best to try to have like a really just objective conversation around this, because you still have the people who are super minimalist. You got to be barefoot all the time. And then there's obviously a different camp of like, well, that may not be the smartest thing in the world. You may need more supportive shoes, blah, 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 blah. So we want to try to have a conversation to help you understand, you know, the landscape of be barefoot, be minimalist. No, wear shoes. What's maybe the right choice for you? What's maybe the key, you know, data points, if you will, or frameworks that you can use to make a better decision for yourself in this realm, as opposed to just like being bare. Like, dude, I saw some dude the other day running on pavement barefoot. Yeah,
Barefoot,
like I saw that
yeah.
all the time in Salt Lake. That was a big thing in Salt Lake. And I'm like,
Really?
bro, how bad do your feet and knees hurt? Right? So I just, and then like with lifting as well, right? Like there are a lot of people like, oh, bro, you got to squat barefoot. And then you watch people squat barefoot, and it's like, that is a train wreck. So
That's not a
yeah,
squat.
that's not a squat. That is, I don't even know what I would describe it as. So let's wrangle this in here. Let's start with the foundation. So maybe if you can give us a primer on the foot, and kind of what we're looking at with the feet.
I think that's a good place to start. So simple enough. The foot is probably the most complex joint in the body, because it's I don't know the actual number, but it's a couple dozen joints in each foot. There are tons of bones. We call them tarsals or metatarsals or phalanges, and they all kind of play into the mobility and the more importantly the stability as well of the foot. Even the ankle is actually two joints. So there's a lot to parse here, I suppose. If we start from the top of the foot, I mean, we've got the shin bone. You've got the big weight bearing, takes 95% of your body weight. It's called the tibia. And then you got this extraneous one on the outside that we say is not very important, but is actually super important. It's called the fibula. The fibula is where your lateral hamstring connects. That helps control the orientation of the foot, helps you point your toes forward. So what we need, what's the number? I want to say we need 35 degrees of dorsiflexion. I just looked this up for my squat video, so I think it's that. 35 degrees of dorsiflexion, which means if I'm squatting, and this is in the closed chain, so my foot is down on the ground, my heel needs to stay down, and more importantly, and this is something that we miss when we coach visually only, and you're not kind of like listening to your body, but the pressure of your ground reaction force needs to go through your heel. Your heel still needs to be weight bearing. You don't want, you can get 35 degrees of dorsiflexion, but be on your toes or the balls of your feet, and you're not gonna you're closing down the mobility that you have, not only in your ankle but also in your hip, and you're overloading your back, all sorts of stuff. So we need 35 degrees of dorsiflexion. You also need to be able to pronate and supinate. Pronate, to me, is simplified by just saying pronate is flattening your foot, and supinating is rolling it outward. So like if you're about to have an ankle sprain, like a traditional ankle sprain, you're supinating. You're on the edge, the outside edge of your foot. And if you're pronating, we say, oh, I have flat feet. You also need, to have, we talk about brain and we talk about sensation a lot. We talk about just kind of being aware of your body and what it's doing. In order for the foot to work, and in order for the body and the hip and everything to work, your foot needs to know where it is. So it's important that you have, I simplify it with 3 points of contact of the foot on the ground. You got the base of the big toe, the base of the pinky toe, and then the heel. A lot of the weight needs to go through the heel because that's directly compressing the ankle joint. If I put a lot of weight on the ball of the foot, then I have a lot of torque at the ankle. My calf gets really active. That kicks my back on and can cause some other issues. Not that you can squat that way. You're really increasing shear forces at your knee when you do that. So do that. keep that in mind at least. Mm-hmm. That's more of an advanced technique. Know the rules before you break them. So we need to be able to pronate. We need to be able to supinate. And then the last thing that we really need is 80 degrees of toe extension. I say we need that because I have one person that I train with perpetual turf toe. It's just like he does squats and he does rear foot elevated squats. That's split squats. That's everything. And then I have another guy whose toe is fused and he doesn't have that. So it's like, for those people, I'm going to expect walking to kind of mess you up because you need that toe extension for walking.
Is that, I want to interrupt you just like super fast on that one.
Yep.
Is that big toe specific or is that all toes?
I would say it's big toe specific.
Yeah. The thing I don't have.
I think I would say it's big toe specific. The rest of them are gonna follow, but you're gonna put more pressure through that big toe, so it's more important that you maintain that mobility. And sometimes people have that mobility, but it's just like the ankle, right? Because you have the like dorsiflexion movement where the toe comes up away from the ground. Like if the foot stayed down, the toe would come up away from the ground. If I step, the heel comes up, but the toe stays on the ground. It's the same movement. If I have a lot of toe flexor activity, that's the toe muscles on the underside of the foot, I get a lot of compression through the toe joint, and that just doesn't feel good. There's this perception that turf toe, which is common in American football, but there's this perception that turf toe is like, it's a small joint, so why is that even a problem? Can't you just play through that? You played through your ACL tear. Mm-hmm. ACLs do a lot less and more importantly, they feel a lot less than toes do. So if we look at, there's this diagram of the brain called the homunculus. It's this crazy looking I picture a sculpture of the human body where the hands are super big, the feet are super big, and the head is super big because that's where most of our brain is dedicated to feeling. Like we might be able to feel how we do a squat, but you can really feel when someone's tickling your foot, right?
Yeah, here we go. Hold on. I got some images pulled up here because we can get fancy. I can like screen share some stuff on here.
There we go.
So people listening, feel free to hop over to the YouTubes where you can kind of actually visually see what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Where do I?
And click the subscribe, Lance Goyke.
Yeah.
I've been pushing the YouTube.
Okay, here we go. It should pop up. Give me a second here. We got the homunculus. This guy is pretty baller looking.
Baller is maybe the way. He kind of looks like Allison's watching Harry Potter right now. He kind of looks like
Great
Dobby.
Movie. Yes, he does. That's a phenomenal reference, man. That is a great reference.
Oh man, now I can't unsee it.
There it is. Here's our homunculus guy. Yeah, massive hands. So you look at that lower lip and that.
Yeah, I didn't realize that one. That's cool.
So
tongue sticking out because you
Tongue
really
sticking
feel the
out.
tongue.
Yeah, like this is kind of what I always think of, is like this image here, where you look at kind of like foot and hands and all this sort of thing going on.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen these little like creatures
Oh no, yeah,
before.
yeah.
This is the first, yeah.
I was in my internship in undergrad was in a motor control lab. So the professor that I spent a lot of time with he's really into this. He's also the strongest person I've ever known. So that's funny.
Nice.
So homunculus is interesting. That sensation is important. So you've got to make sure the foot knows where it's at. And you got to make sure you have the requisite mobility. And then anything after that is like gravy. Like you can get extra, running speed out of toe flexor strength. You probably shouldn't spend your time there, but that was a whole article the late Charles Poliquin wrote about he put weights on a towel and he would curl his toe towards his body, or he would have his athletes do that as runners. It's a long lever, so if you maximize that, that's probably pretty good. I would think that I would definitely get turf toe because I'm injury prone if I did that. But I don't know. Was that a sufficient overview of the
think that's a good
anatomy?
overview. And I think
I didn't even say subtalar.
I was
at
really
any
impressed.
point.
I was very impressed you managed to stay away from subtalar. But I think that a lot of the stuff with the foot we can relate back to gait, right? Because I think that's kind of the framework of the foundation that we work off of. We kind of think about gait. We're humans. We're meant to have gait. We're meant to walk, propel ourselves through space. And I think that's often maybe the easiest place to start sometimes when we think about the function of the foot and the different things that you just described and what we want to have happening at the foot. We can often look at them like, okay, well, what is happening during gait? Because that's where we're going to spend the vast majority of our time, is up on our feet, hopefully walking around. People listening to this, I'm assuming you're on your feet walking around throughout the day, not sitting all the time. But when you think about, let me see the best way to phrase this. Where are some of the most common places where things begin to go wrong at the foot with relation to, let's just start with like basic gait? I think because you described what we need, where do things start to go awry?
The first thing that I would say is you have too much activity. I mentioned it in the intro there briefly, but like if I really compress a joint, I'm going to lose its mobility. It's got to stay relaxed if I'm going to feel all of its mobility. You shouldn't, the fastest runners or walkers, even like race walking, they don't try 100% all of the time, because if they try 100% all the time, they get too stiff and they don't conserve their energy well enough. And they don't utilize the connective tissues like the tendons and the stretch reflex from all of that. So that's, you can look at running as well to compare it to gait, though running and walking.
Sorry, there's
same.
a railroad behind our house that we didn't even know was actually still in service. But there was a very small steam engine that just went down that railroad.
Is this the first time?
Yeah, the very first time.
It's been a month, right?
More than 2 months.
Oh, God.
That's what our neighbor
Where
said.
is
Our
the
neighbor said
world
that thing
going?
was going to come in maybe 2 or 3 times a year. That was very short.
Wow.
Okay, cool. Nice, because we confirmed that
wonder
before I
what they're
bought this. I'm
doing.
like, I'm not buying this dang house if I'm going to have a train coming down those train tracks in the middle of the night. They're like,
When
no,
I'm
it's like a
recording,
super
yeah.
old steam engine, and it comes 2 to 3 times a year. They're like, it's actually an activity.
Yeah.
Like when it comes, people come out of the house to look at it because it doesn't happen that frequently. Okay,
That's funny.
please continue.
Yeah, I feel like I've been derailed off the train tracks.
Feet and walking, and then the compression of the joint.
Yep. Yeah, we were talking about compression limiting your mobility. To me, that's the first thing. And that's why hip mobility, there are people who talk a lot about the feet, and I agree that the feet are important. I think it's more likely that something up the chain is causing your issue down the chain. I don't think a lot of people, and it could still be like an 80-20 split, 20% is still 1 in 5. But I don't think a lot of people have the problem stemming from the foot. I have seen people who have the problem stemming from the foot, but most of the time it's a muscle activity issue. The other component of that is, I think it's easier to just explain it like that, but the other component of that is we say arthrokinematics. How does the joint position affect how the joint works? And walking is a great example of, the world is in front of me, so my brain is going to orient that way. And if my hip doesn't have internal rotation when I extend my leg, my toe is going to have to turn out. I'm going to roll over the inside of my foot, and I might develop a bunion on the inside of my big toe. Like that's a really clear example of, now I'm limited somewhere. My body's going to have to compensate, and that type of person never gets dorsiflexion when they take their steps. They never get dorsiflexion in late mid stance, so they don't need it. And when they come to, I don't know, squat, they're going to be a very hip dominant squatter. They're going to bend over a lot. They're going to really identify with a vertical shin squatting just because they can't handle it otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Where does footwear come into this conversation?
So there's a couple pieces of this. I would say first, if we're talking about walking, footwear serves the purpose to level the playing field, level the ground, literally. If I have a foot that's prone to rolling outward, right, I need something that's going to help it not roll outward. So I'm going to need some support on the lateral surface of the shoe so I don't roll through it. And I'm going to need some sort of sensation on the inside part of the foot that is higher up than I would normally expect, because my foot can't get down to the ground, so I need to bring the ground up to it. I think that makes a lot of sense, because then I can promote that big toe, pinky toe, or base of the big toe, base of the pinky toe, and heel 3 points of contact in the foot. I can give that homunculus sensation, right? So that's the first part of shoe footwear. The other part is, like, if you have to consider, is this a structural problem or is this a functional problem? Do you just not know how to control your foot? Have you not done your hip mobility stuff? Then you might not need orthotics from I almost said orthodontist, podiatrist. You might not need orthotics from a podiatrist. That was a little slip there. That was funny. Maybe that's what I meant, orthodontist. Mm-hmm. You might not need.
You may need an orthodontist. Who knows?
You might. You might not need. Sorry, my image is so hot here. I got to turn this down. It's bothering me. You might not need the hard insole kind of thing, and the person at the shoe store might not be able to help you, even if they're educated in their brand of shoes. So first, you got to promote sensation when you're walking, promote a level playing field. The other part of that is you have to appreciate how, we talked about anatomy already, but you have to appreciate how the foot works. A lot of shoes, like really light ones, like the Nike Freeze were like this, and the Kanye ones, I think, are like this too. I don't really know.
I don't follow shoe lines, so I can't help you on the Kanye shoes.
What they do is when I try to scrunch the front and the back together, a lot of them will bend in the middle of the foot, which is absolutely not where you want your foot to bend. That is the part that needs to be rigid, because it's bones. It's like it's the long metatarsal bones. So we don't want that to be the point of most mobility in your shoe. You want the toe to bend, because that will promote your toe from bending and it won't stiffen it up. So we need a level playing field, and we need bending in the toe. We also need that, and I said it already, but we need that stable heel counter, so that if I try to start rolling outward, my shoe's going to remind me, hey, don't do that. I want you to stay level. Mm-hmm. Supination is okay, but persistent supination where you never pronate is not okay, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think this overly supinated, that's probably what we see more than, that's what we see the most with our people, right? Like people that lift, people that are athletes, strong, powerful, explosive, etc. We probably see more of that over pronation. Sorry, the over like supination. Misspoke there for a second. We see more of that supination where they need the references and the inputs to help them. One of the ways I've always thought about it is like if I'm a supinator, if you want to call it that, and I'm going through gait, and it's gonna be very hard for me to go find and feel the floor with the medial side of my foot, whether that's that kind of the arch, and then also more the medial side of that heel bone. And so that's where having a more supportive shoe can really help, because as my foot lands in gait and I start to pronate down, I'm going to get a sensory input. This is what you're talking about with leveling the playing field, right? Like I'll get the sensory input that I need to then actually project me forward in space, and I can get my big toe to actually flex and do what it's supposed to do. The issue, if you take one of these supinators and you throw them in super minimalist shoes or have them barefoot, it's like, okay, I get that heel contact and I'm starting to try to pronate down, and it's like, okay, where's the floor? 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 Where? And you just go for days. Yeah. And you have to go searching for it. It's like by the time you get there, you're just going to be like super sunk into that right hip. If we use the right side as an example, you're not going to get probably any, big toe extension there as you actually project off and try to move yourself forward with gait. And so having a more supportive shoe there really makes a lot of sense for people. And the issue is if you just go super minimalist with that, you're kind of asking to run into trouble potentially.
Yeah, you need a really stable foot, but more importantly, and you mentioned this, I don't know if we were recording yet, but you mentioned somebody running on pavement in barefoot. Right? Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with minimalist shoes. You just have a little bit more skin protection with the shoes. The foot, running barefoot is probably really good for people. Sometimes if I'm running like up a hill in actual dirt, it's probably okay. But if I'm running on pavement, the foot was not designed to run on pavement. It's too hard and it's too flat. And really, really importantly, like we say that the ground is hard, but I think being too flat is actually more of the issue. So when you take a not super cool, traditional athletic shoe that's been around for 30 years, those, not all of them are good, but some of them actually help out a lot because they promote some, not instability, but unlevelness that allows your foot to feel different sensations. And what that determines is your hip activity, determines your ankle activity. And that promotes, well, the whole reason we're doing all this is to promote more relaxation around the muscles of that joint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really important one that people don't ever talk about in this realm. Our foot evolved and was designed over time to be on not pavement and concrete, hardwood floors, tile, things that are humanly made and super flat and super hard. Like our ancestors were barefoot, yes, but they were barefoot on like grass and dirt and rolling hills and like very different terrain.
Yeah.
Right. So like trying to be barefoot on super hard flat surfaces versus being barefoot when you're out walking in the yard where you get that natural, change in the contour of the land. And like that's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think maybe that's a good point to bring up here is I think you and I both agree, like we are bigger fans of a more supportive shoe structure for people because of the fact that we are spending our time on really flat, really hard surfaces now.
Yeah.
Are there specific instances and times where you like to get people barefoot though, so that we can work on that kind of foot control and foot placement? Because, right, like, do you think that putting someone in an overly supportive shoe for too long and never getting them barefoot can also potentially have some consequences for them long term?
Yeah, if you can train a little bit or live a little bit, let's just say, if you can live a little bit with those shoes and live a little bit without those shoes and maybe live a little bit with some other shoes that aren't so bad for you, that variability is really good for your brain and it's really good for your foot and your other joints. The biggest thing that I would say I would not use shoes for, and I promote barefoot for, or at least I support it. I don't know that I actively promote it because sometimes it's a pain, but lifting. I'm okay if if you do heavy squats and deadlifts, especially deadlifts, doing that barefoot, it's great as long as you don't get ringworm. The problem is we have a lot of people who don't have, I might be more prone to saying, hey, my Asian client, maybe you can squat barefoot and that's okay. But, my English client is maybe not, doesn't have the genetics for that, doesn't have the ankle mobility for that. Mm-hmm. And all they're going to do is they're just going to do essentially a good morning, which I did a video on too. That's coming out soon. And they're just going to do good mornings, and they're never actually going to get that, they might get as much dorsiflexion as they have, but it's not going to get them the pelvic mobility and the pelvic floor position that I might be looking for, I don't know, promoting long-term power and mobility and health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think on the squatting, like for me, barefoot deadlift, I really like that. Usually if I'm doing lunges, single leg RDLs, I think those are places that's a really good opportunity to get people barefoot, to give them the opportunity to explore, to find, and to feel, and to actually have that expression. Squats are really difficult, as you mentioned, and that's a person by person, client by client basis. I got to see it, right? It's like, sure, I would love to try squatting you barefoot. Let's see what that looks like. If it's just a total train wreck, then let's try something else. Maybe this just isn't really in the cards for you, and that's okay, because we can work on this foot ankle stuff elsewhere. Most people I found are pretty good deadlifting, just because of, especially if we're on a high handle trap bar, like the requirements of range of motion at the ankle and foot are pretty minimal.
Nilch, yeah.
I think another interesting thing here to potentially touch on is how much do you care about the ability of the foot to kind of like actually spread out? Because this is something personally that I've struggled with over time. A lot of times the more supportive shoes, I feel like I get like super, people that can't see this if they're not watching the video, I'm bringing my fingers and my hands together. They kind of like scrunch all my toes together, and my foot just feels like pinched from the sides. It doesn't feel like it has the ability to really like spread and feel the floor.
Yeah.
That's what's been annoying to me in the shoe realm, is I can't find one that does both.
Yeah.
I have my Asics, which I really like because they're nice and supportive. They feel so much better if I'm on pavement and things like that. And then I also have like a pair of Ultras that are super minimalist that I like to wear if we're on trails, because the trail is so fluid. It kind of gives me more of that find and feel. And the Ultras are nice because it allows my foot to spread more. The Asics kind of tend to crunch me up a bit. I'm waiting for somebody to come out with a supportive shoe that has a big ass toe box so my toes can spread out and not get like totally scrunched up together.
Claustrophobic. Yeah. I mean, that is definitely important. Though I would just bunch that in with pronation. Like, you want the foot to be able to pronate, and that means you want your toes to be able to spread too. Mm-hmm. If I supinate, that squeezes my toes together a little bit more. So that's how I would think about it.
Yep. Are there any specific, I don't know if exercise is the right word here, but any specific things that you like having people do to work on their feet? Or is it more, let's make sure we've addressed things happening at the pelvis and rib cage, and then let's just make sure that we get you in, a better pair of shoes dependent upon the circumstance, right? 'Cause I think like the environment is going to dictate what type of shoe you should probably be wanting to wear. Again, I'll say to people, like if you're spending a lot of time on hard, flat surfaces, you're probably going to want something that's a little bit more supportive, as we've talked about thus far throughout the episode. When you train and lift, avoid ringworm. But like that's a great time to get barefoot if you can, right? Deadlifts, lunges, single leg RDLs, even like your pressing movements, just opportunities for your foot to kind of explore and figure out what's going on out there. Squats and other activities that have really big dorsiflexion components to them, you're going to need to really keep an eye on that and just see what it looks like. Like we have a good side-by-side image at Rebel of someone who really likes squatting more kind of like in flats barefoot. And they were like, just do me a favor and squat with like an Olympic lifter or with a heel wedge. And the movement pattern is, it's like 100-fold better when he gets a heel wedge, right? Yeah. We're like, hey, well, this is just what we're going to do here, but we can still do some barefoot stuff elsewhere. And then I think give yourself some variability of input here. Like have the supportive shoes for hard, flat surfaces. Maybe have just the minimalist shoes that you can wear out on the trails, or if you can do it, go barefoot. You know, outside of that, are there any specific exercises or things that you like to do potentially help with the proprioception or like the strength or the awareness of what's going on down there? Or do you think that variability of input should probably be enough for people as long as we do a good job with what's happening upstream?
As long as you're an active person, I think the variability of input is enough. I will say, like, I haven't spent a lot of time testing a lot of people with specific foot exercises, because I think it seems dumb. It seems like a waste of time. But maybe it's not, and it might very much not be for specific people. If somebody is describing to me like my foot is just really tired, another exercise that I might do, this is the most specific to the foot one that I'll do. I'll have people take a wide stance and then touch the toes on one foot, touch the toes on the other foot, and they just kind of slide back and forth. And I say, every time you slide, I want you to push the inside of your foot down. The opposite foot pushes really hard on the ground, and that promotes that pronation. So that would be great if that is a limitation that you have. And then most people have dorsiflexion limitations. So split squats and squats. That's how we're promoting ankle mobility. And like you said, you've got to make sure the rib cage and the pelvis are in the right position. You got to make sure the muscle tension activity in that area is correct. Other than that, squats and split squats, that's the way to get dorsiflexion. It's Mountain Dew, baby.
Yeah, I'm glad you went there. That was going to be the last question I was going to go to here, because I know that there are going to be definitely people listening. They're like, but I need dorsiflexion. And this dude told me that if I just like ankle mob myself and like wrap a band around this joint and I just sit here and like crank my knee forward over my toes, I can get back my dorsiflexion. And so, yeah, I would tend to agree with you that I think split squats and squats and some other exercises are probably going to be more successful in helping you reclaim that dorsiflexion. Because we've talked about before on the show here, we're not huge fans of stretching, because stretching really isn't actually solving the problem per se. It's kind of just
it doesn't help the position here.
It's like the Band-Aid, right? Like it's that I have a rock in my shoe, so I'll take Advil type thing. Like maybe we just try to take the rock out of your shoe instead. And so in addition to split squats and squats, well, maybe you could do this. If you could just like really quickly, what is it that is actually kind of getting in the way and limiting dorsiflexion for most people? We can't specifically say guaranteed this is going to be it for every one of you, but for a large majority of people, the middle of the bell curve, on the average, what is it like? Why are they actually seeing decreased dorsiflexion? Is it because of the fact that we have excessive tone running through these big calf muscles that aren't then allowing the ankle to actually dorsiflex?
I would say that is the easiest way to look at the problem, and that's how I explain it and even evaluate it. You've got the calf, even when I'm not dorsiflex, when I'm just like 0 degrees of dorsiflexion, just standing there. If I got a lot of calf activity, which I might have, especially if I'm shifted forward onto the ball of my foot, like that calf muscle compresses the joint. It pulls the foot into the ankle. And when I do that, I eliminate space to move on. So like, if you put a golf ball on a tee and you push them really hard together, it's really hard to turn the golf ball. But if you pull it a millimeter away from the tee, it just spins freely, right? Mm-hmm. So that would be how I would look at that. The other thing that I would just say is, generally, if I see someone who can't dorsiflex, I want them to dorsiflex. I want them to get pressure through the heels, but I'm spending all of my time focusing on pelvic position, because usually they're gonna do their squat, they're gonna come down for their pelvic position, and then about halfway they're gonna bend over a lot, and they're gonna just they're just gonna try to shift the load away from the quad and away from the ankle, and instead of moving through those joints, they're just gonna keep them rigid. So usually you need to squat a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. I think the ankles get blamed a lot for people that can't squat well, air quotes. I think that a lot of times you need to look more upstream. Like that that wall that you feel like you run into, because people always do, right? Okay, I'm squatting down, and then I feel like I just run into a brick wall, and I'm like, well, the only way I can keep going down is to just fall over forward.
Yeah.
That stuff usually is actually happening at your pelvis. It's not your ankle's fault. There are things that we need to do at the pelvis to clear that up, and then people are usually amazed once you do clear that up, and they just go, boop, they just drop right down. They're like, oh my God, you didn't even touch my ankle. It's like, yeah, I know. This poor ankle. These poor ankles been getting blamed for years.
Yeah.
These damn scapegoats.
Black.
I'll throw two other exercises in here super quick for people, and then we're gonna wrap this up. So, I think in this dorsiflexion realm, I also really like exercises like a yoga push-up. I think is really good, where I'm reaching, trying to sink my heels down to the floor. I can get a breath in there to try to get that calf tension to calm down. Things like inchworms as well, where I can slowly like walk my feet up towards my hands, and kind of like it's more of a breathing inchworm where I'm reaching into the floor. I kind of walk my feet up a few inches, take a big breath in and out, walk my feet up a few inches, take a big breath in and out. That's another really nice way to start to reclaim this, because you're really just trying to get the tone being held in that big strong calf to kind of just chill out for you. Those are two exercises I found that help a lot as well.
I've got another one for you. It's kind of like the mix of those two. If I'm doing the yoga push-up idea, like the downward dog position, where both my heels are sinking towards the ground, if I start there and then I take a step forward with one foot and really try to stretch that heel towards the ground, don't force it, don't rip anything, but get an extra stretch. And then you also get pelvic rotation when you take that step. I call that one the bear walk, and I got it from Joseph Cicinelli, who's a PT in San Francisco area.
Nice. So you're kind of at the top end of that yoga push-up, and then you say you walk 1 foot forward, and kind of get let that heel sink, and then get a little bit of a stretch, and
I would propel forward too. I would take a step with the arm.
Oh, okay, I got it.
And then another step. It's kind of like a bear. I call it the bear walk, because it's like a bear crawl, except.
Do you have a video of this on YouTube?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll throw a link in the show notes to a video of the bear walk, and maybe we can snag that and get it on Instagram for people to see as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Beautiful.
James, do you have a minute to talk more about the foot and the ankle for a sec?
Yeah, let's do it.
So before we go, I just want to talk a little bit about special cases, special circumstances.
The people outside of the bell curve, my favorite.
Because, that's my specialty. I just I was one of those people, and I followed a lot of advice, and all that advice made a lot of sense, and it didn't help me. So I want to talk about that a little bit. First, if you are, if you're in the bell curve and you're listening to that advice, and I think we talked about knees out versus in before.
Yeah, we had a whole squat episode for that one.
So, if you are the type of person who likes to lift really heavy, we have said that, the Rebel people who come to us, like the people that I train at Rebel, they tend to go knees out, and they tend to supinate. And they tend to not really feel the ground. They tend to not really load the muscle. They load the joints and the ligaments instead. We talked. I mentioned briefly that you might just need to squat a different way, and that is one of the criteria. There's two criteria. One, you might need to be more upright. You might need to have more dorsiflexion, drop your butt straight down, and you might need to even limit your depth. But that's a whole nother thing that we're not going to get into. And then the other thing is, you might just not need to push the knees out so far. That might be causing a lot of the issues there. So that's the first thing that I wanted to talk about, was like, you might be doing this to yourself. Just because, and it's fine, you just don't know any better. But play around with that a little bit. Just make sure that you do have some, I don't want to be, it's not that more pronation or more supination. See, I misspoke too now. It's not that more supination is better. It's that having variability in the foot, and you want some sort of like neutral angle. It should pronate and supinate very, very slightly during the squat, but you shouldn't cue it. It should be automatic. If you have the relaxation through the ankle, that should be fine. So lesson 1 is don't mess yourself up. Lesson 2 is some people actually have feet that don't look like other people's feet. If you're missing your big toe, for example, like that that's something we have to consider. It's probably going to be a little bit harder to control your pronation because the flexor hallucis longus, the big toe flexor that goes all the way up into your calf, that helps promote supination. It's probably the strongest supinator you have. It goes underneath it's one of my favorite words, the sustentaculum tali, and it lifts up the medial edge of the ankle and it rolls the ankle outward. And that's what gives us supination. If I don't have a big toe, I don't have that. So I might need to move more slowly. I might not do things that are super power or super athletic. And, you can, if you can make do with it. But just be aware that it's probably going to stiffen you up and you're going to have to do other stuff, other accessory work later on to keep yourself together. So that's a second example. The other bony reshaping that I think is super common is just a flat foot. You can see people, if you look at them, it just looks like a pancake. Like the foot just spreads all the way out. If you put paint on the bottom of the foot and you took a step, like that step would look like a triangle. It wouldn't look like this oblong shape amoeba thing with toes, right? For someone like that, we talked about buying shoes to level the ground for someone. If you have a pretty normal foot and you just have, you have we say like a physiological problem, something that you could cue and fix. Then normal shoes will be okay. If you have a structurally flat foot, like my father, you're not going to buy normal shoes and be able to fix that. You need a very hard plastic underneath your foot that creates an arch in your foot to maintain it. So don't ask for help from someone, get a podiatrist in that case. It's going to be really important, not just for your foot and your ankle. I hope if you're listening and you have shoulder problems and you've thought, maybe my foot is flat, I would hope that you would go to a podiatrist because they might be able to help you with your shoulder problems and not even know it.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice asterisk that we should probably throw on every episode we do, which is that all of this is very nuanced. We try our best on the show and in these episodes to simplify it as much as we can and to try to speak to the middle of the bell curve, right? We'll call it 85-90% of people out there, because we want you to be able to try to take this stuff and actually use it and for it to be useful and helpful for you in your training and in your life. But it is always nuanced. There are way more layers to this than we can get into. We would also bore you all to death if we really dove into the weeds on all of this. So we try to keep it more surface level and really action oriented. But if we're saying things and you're trying it and you feel like this just isn't working, that's okay. Just ask for some more help because you need more detail. We're trying to give advice and recommendation that's going to help that middle of the bell curve. We're going to help 85 to 90% of you with this very just surface level stuff. And then there are going to be 10 to 15% of you that maybe it just doesn't work for, and that's okay. Just reach out and get help because you just need someone to drill and dive deeper into your specific situation. Yeah. So I think that's a really important point.
You need someone with the knowledge to advocate for you.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Well, Lance, thank you, my friend. Once again, we said that this is going to be a short episode, and we're cracking up on 45 minutes. So,
I'm out of body water and air. I feel like I had no idea I had so much to say about the feet.
I love it. Well, I'm going to go here and probably have coffee number 2, then head down into the basement to get a lift in. But my man, hope that you have a beautiful day. Hope everyone enjoyed the episode. If you have questions, thoughts, concerns, you guys can always reach us, DM us on Instagram, drop us an email, hello@rebel-performance.com. We also have a Facebook group that you can join where you can kind of interact and ask us questions as well. All that will be in the show notes. Have a great week, folks.